Coming to you from the mountains and the plain. The only conservative voices brave enough to push back. This is the Conservative Daily Podcast with Joe Otto.
That's what the Second Amendment was designed to do. If you're going to do something to nullify or take away my rights under the Constitution, come get it.
Max McGuire.
When you look at politicians on the left, they need to convince people that they are victims.
A resistance to the resistance. And now your hosts, Joe Otto and Max McGuire.
And welcome back to another edition of the Conservative Daily Podcast. My name is Max McGuire. Joe Otto is out today, so it's just going to be me on here doing the podcast alone today, which is fine. If you're watching us on Facebook, feel free to write in the comment section any questions or comments you have. Same goes with YouTube. I'm watching those as we go along. So today we're going to be talking about the news that the mayor of Portland, Ted Wheeler, decided he was going to go out to the the riots last night in Portland. Decided he was going to go to the riots, and he had a very bad time. He was tear gassed, but before he was tear gassed, he was actually chased out by the people he was there to support. The rioters wanted nothing to do with it. It was actually very funny. He was giving a speech, and behind him, the rioters, the protesters, had projected an image onto a wall behind him that was calling for him to resign. So he was very, very emasculated. He did not get the photo op that he was looking for. But before we get to that, we're going to talk about that. Before we get to that, I want to start with what happened yesterday. Yesterday, very good podcast. If you missed it, definitely check it out. We had John Teagan, one of the Benghazi contractors, on the show talking about self-defense and stand-down orders, which is something he's very experienced with receiving, unfortunately. We had a lot of people on the stream. At one point, our max number of people watching at the same time was 497, which was great. Fantastic news. Biden also had a live stream yesterday. Joe Biden also had a live stream. And let's throw up image number 1. This is a screen grab from Joe Biden's live stream yesterday. And as you can see, 19 people were watching 26 minutes into the stream. Apparently that got up as high as 26, but that was really the peak. 26 was the peak of Joe Biden's live stream, and we had just shy of 500. So we're asking everyone, let's beat Joe Biden again. Let's leave him in the dust again. Make sure you hit the share button so we can make Joe Biden look even more foolish than he already does. So make sure you hit the share button, like the video, and definitely leave some comments in the comment section. So before we get to the protesters, I want to play a couple of clips from that live stream that are just so egregious, so ridiculous that we're not going to spend the whole hour talking about it, but someone needs to talk about what Joe Biden was saying yesterday on that sparsely attended podcast, because obviously no one watched it live. And that's the funny thing. Joe Biden probably had 2 or 3 campaign members watching. I was watching. I know Fox News had a couple people watching. When you add up the media and the actual campaign officials, there were probably only 5, 6, 7 real citizens not connected with the campaign or not connected with the media who were watching. Really, really embarrassing stuff. But I want to play one of the crazy things that he said, which was that you can't blame China for the coronavirus because I guess all Asians look alike. Very strange stuff. Let's play cut 1.
Look what he's doing now. He's blaming everything on China. He's blaming everything on the Chinese. He's blaming everything, and people don't make a distinction. As you well know, from a South Korean and someone from Beijing, they make no distinction. It's Asia. And that's the way he's just using it as a wedge.
So you can't blame China for the coronavirus because if you do, apparently in his mind, everyone will think that he's actually being racist against all Asians. Very, very strange stuff. And then he had another little story that he wanted to share, which was that when he was in the hospital a while back, he had nurses breathing into his nostrils to wake him up. Never heard of that before. Let's play cut 2.
And I had a nurse nurses at Walter Reed Hospital who would bend down and whisper in my ear. Wow. And go home and get me pillows. They would make sure they'd actually, probably nothing ever taught in, you can't do it in the COVID time, but They'd actually breathe in my nostrils to make me move, to get me moving.
It's funny. I talked to a couple of nurses, people who've been nurses for decades, and they said that in their entire career, they've never breathed into someone's nose to get them going. I don't know what kind of hospital Joe Biden was in, but he was getting special treatment. Let's just leave it at that. If that was happening, if that wasn't a lie, he was getting special treatment. I've also never heard of nurses leaving the hospital to go get pillows for a patient. Usually that's family members or friends who do it. But apparently he got the special treatment where the nurses went to to get his pillows too, breathing in his nose and getting him pillows. It's interesting stuff. You know, let's throw a couple other Joe Biden clips from the last couple of days. Here is him doing an interview with an Arizona reporter, and the reporter is not being hostile at all. The reporter actually asked Joe Biden, the question was, is the Trump administration to blame or are Republican governors to blame? And Joe Biden went on this long tangent about masks and ended up blowing up by the reporter out of nowhere, to the point where one of his staffers actually cut off the live feed so that he couldn't embarrass himself anymore. Let's go to cut 3.
This is more patriotic. Why do you wear the mask? So you don't make somebody else sick.
I want to ask
Sick. What's with this guy?
Steve, that's our time.
Okay. All right. I appreciate your time. Thanks so much to Mr. Vice President as well.
The question had nothing to do with masks. It had nothing to do with whether masks keep you sick or keep you healthy or not. Joe Biden went on this long ramble and then decided in his mind that the interviewer was being hostile. So his staffer, as you saw, had to cut the feed before Joe Biden could embarrass himself anymore. Let's play this. This happened last week. This was another interview with an Arizona local TV station. I don't know what it is about Arizona that just makes Joe Biden go off the deep end. But let's play this. It's cut 5, Joe Biden calling Arizona a city.
Right now by former Vice President and presumptive Democratic nominee Joe Biden. Good to see you, sir. And look, Arizona is very much in play in 2020, so we appreciate you taking some time to talk to the people of our state.
Oh, it's an important city. You guys are going through hell right now, aren't you?
So, yeah, sure, you can mess things up. But right before he says, the interviewer says, "Thank you for taking time to talk to the people of our state." And then Joe Biden says, "Yeah, it's an important city." You can't make it up. And then later in that interview, Joe Biden again had the feed cut off by one of his staffers to prevent him from making any bigger of a fool of himself. Let's go to cut 6.
Most would agree, Mr. Biden, that
Mark,
Russia
that's our
is not
time.
our
Thank you so
friend.
much.
It never has been and never will be. What about China? Friend or foe?
They just cut the feed. Are they cutting Joe Biden's feed once he gets to 10 minutes? Because once he gets longer than 10 minutes, he embarrasses himself? Or are they watching him as he goes off the rails to make sure he doesn't do any extra damage? I don't know, but once you hit around that 8, 9, 10-minute mark in an interview, his staffers are literally pulling the plug on the camera so that people can't see what he's saying. And yeah, you might think that that's just an innocent thing, but as I mentioned, that same interview, he was going off the rails already. He was calling Arizona a city. It's insane. Well, the reason we're showing that is because Joe Biden's been having a really hard time with his live streams. As I mentioned at the start, yesterday he had a peak of 26 people watching his live stream. We had 497 watching ours. So we want to leave Sleepy Joe in the dust again today. So please make sure, as I mentioned, hit that share button, give the video a like, and leave some comments in the comment section so we can get more people watching today's stream. Okay, that behind us, the Joe Biden antics behind us, I want to talk about the issue of the day, which is Portland. Right? Portland was a mess last night, just like it has been for the last 50 some odd days. It wasn't federal officers who caused this. These riots have been going nightly for over a month and a half, going on 2 months. It's not the federal government's fault. It's not Trump's doing. It's the rioters themselves, right? These fires aren't setting themselves. The explosives aren't being thrown themselves. The punches aren't being thrown themselves. The ball bearings aren't being shot out of slingshots on their own. These are the peaceful protesters doing that. But last night was interesting in Portland because last night you had the mayor of Portland, Ted Wheeler, decide to make an appearance on his own. He wanted to be down there. He wanted to see what was going on. He wanted to show his support for the protesters. at the riot. He wanted to join in on the riot, right? It was classified as an unlawful assembly, and the mayor of the city decided to assemble with him. What does that make him? Criminal, rioter. It definitely doesn't make him a peaceful protester. If something is declared an unlawful assembly and a politician joins it, they're not a peaceful protester. The funny thing was, as I mentioned earlier, the rioters, the protesters, didn't actually like that he was there. They were calling on him to resign, making fun of him. They were throwing things at him. He ended up having to be ushered out by his private security detail, which you don't need in a peaceful protest. The fact that he had a private security detail there while still claiming this was peaceful kind of proves that that doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. But I want to play a couple clips just so you can see what was going on. And almost all of this action is going on around the federal courthouse in Portland. The rioters want the courthouse destroyed. The federal officers there, as part of Operation Legend, being pushed into the city by Trump and Barr, they want to make sure that the courthouse doesn't get destroyed. And as we mentioned on a couple of the last podcasts, right when all of this started, right before federal officers were sent in, the rioters actually broke the windows of the courthouse and threw fireworks inside in an attempt to burn it down. The other night, they barricaded officers into the building and tried to set it on fire with them trapped inside. These are not victimless crimes. And an important thing to note, we'll mention it again later as we watch the videos of the explosives. Federal law surrounding explosives is very clear. It's the National Firearms Act of 1934. And unless you have the proper permitting from the ATF, it is possible, but unless you have the proper permitting, it is against the law to be in possession of what's called a destructive device. Now, that's an explosive. That can be a grenade. It can be a rocket. It can be an artillery shell, right? An explosive. There are other things that can be destructive devices, but explosives fall into that category too. The interesting thing is that commercial fireworks, when used as a weapon, also become classified as destructive devices because they're not being used in the manner in which they were designed. So when you shoot a firework at someone, you are attacking someone with an unregulated destructive device, an explosive. The law treats that really no differently than they would if you threw a hand grenade. So just as we're clear going into this, when you see these protesters lobbing firecrackers, shooting fireworks, right, throwing explosives, the law does not treat that any differently than if they were to have rocket-propelled grenades shooting them at the officers. Assault is assault. It's still a deadly weapon. It's still a destructive device. It's the same crime that they would be charged with if they were committing a crime and using an unlicensed machine gun, right? It's the unlicensed sawed-off shotgun or short-barreled shotgun or short-barreled rifle, using an unlicensed suppressor. The same crime. It's the National Firearms Act of 1934. So let's play a couple of these clips just so you can get a feel for what was going on at the protest last night. Let's play cut 7. Lots of fires. And if you're on the left and you're saying these are peaceful protests, where are we talking about? One of the first documented cases of truly spontaneous combustion? No, those are fires started by these protesters, the peaceful protesters. They not only were starting fires, but they were also throwing incendiary devices, which again fall under the National Firearms Act of 1934 and are classified as destructive devices. When you throw a Molotov cocktail at someone, the law doesn't treat that any differently than if you were to throw an explosive, right? If you were to use a flamethrower on someone. Actually, flamethrowers are a little different. Flamethrowers are not regulated under federal law. That would be a state issue. But the point is, when you throw a Molotov cocktail at someone, you're throwing a destructive device. You're trying to kill that person, all right? So whether these fires are set as arson or whether they're started by throwing an incendiary device, laws are broken. And then that's what we're trying to paint the picture here. Let's go to cut 8 and see another video of these fires. So at this point in the night, the protesters, rioters, had breached the fence. Because as you can see, they're starting fires on their side, which is very dumb, right? If you have a crowd of protesters, air quotes, the last thing you'd want to do would be to start a fire on your side of the fence, because now you are on fire. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But you can see at that point in that video, they had breached the fence and were setting fires on the other side. So that might have been a little bit from later in the evening than what we're about to talk about. But the point is, they were trying to burn down the courthouse again, using destructive devices, fireworks, incendiary devices, and just lighting things on fire. So there were crimes being committed. Absolutely, there were crimes being committed. A couple of the federal officers had to be brought away because they had lasers pointed right into their eyes, which is a federal crime. That is assault. You are assaulting a federal officer. A laser can permanently blind someone if you fire it into their eyes. So it's not child's play. Like, it's not just like a little laser pointer. These are serious lasers that can do permanent damage to someone's eye. Officers have to be dragged away because they're being assaulted. That's assault. It might not be physical assault, but just because it's not them hitting them doesn't mean it isn't classified as assault. So I want to play these clips because the funniest part of this to me was when Portland Mayor Ted Wheeler showed up. Because not only did he want to show up, he wanted to show that he was there in support, and he wanted the photo op. He wanted the photo op of him being tear gassed. That was the goal of this. His goal of the evening was to get tear gassed. How do I know that? Because he went right to the front of the line. He went to the front line. He went right to the fence and didn't move. Even as explosives were being thrown around him, fires were being lit around him, smoke grenades going off, tear gas going off, he didn't move. He wanted to be gassed. Let's watch this first video. It's short of Wheeler standing next to the fence. Let's go to cut 9. Oh no. He's getting tear gas. Oh man. Play stupid games, win stupid prizes. You look at that video, all the guys around them are wearing respirators. Why? Because they know they're going to get tear gas. That is a press. That's a reporter. He has press on his helmet. He's wearing a full respirator and goggles. He knows that if you're going to be taking footage, photos or videos from the front line there, you're gassed. Right? The mayor of Portland wanted to get tear gassed. So he sat there, and you watch as the explosives are being hurled past him towards the federal officers. You watch as things are being lit on fire, whizzing past on screen. Right? You hear the explosions. You see everything going on around him, and he's sitting still. Like, I watched some of these videos, and I flinched. Right? I'm like, oh, wow. They're lighting fireworks right next to the mayor of the city. Wow, that's a little disturbing. He didn't even flinch because he expected it. He wanted it to happen. He wanted there to be lawlessness so that he could claim he was being tear gassed. Here's another angle of it. Let's go watch cut 10 as the bombs are flying past him.
You've been doing that for 50 nights, Ted. There it is. There it is, Ted. You've been doing that for 50 nights. More than 50 nights you've been doing that to us. You're just as bad as that. What are you going to do? You're just as bad as them, Ted.
So he's being heckled. Not only is he there to try and get tear gas, to try and make himself part of the news story, but he's getting heckled. Like, hey, Ted, welcome to the party, Ted. They've been tear gassing us for 50 straight days, Ted. Where have you been? They're heckling him. Those aren't Trump supporters. Those are the protesters. Those are the protesters, the rioters, heckling the mayor. Like, oh, yeah, you want your photo op. Oh, yeah. Where have you been for the last 50-plus days, Ted? And you can see in that video, let's play that video again because you can see that the rioters tossed an explosive right in front of them. Well, let's play that cut one more time. Let's go to cut 10.
You've been doing that for 50 nights, Ted.
Right there. Right there. That's not a flashbang. That wasn't tear gas. Let's cut it right there. That wasn't a flashbang. That wasn't tear gas. It was an improvised explosive device. Either that or a commercial firecracker or some kind of firework. It blew up twice. That's how you know it wasn't a flashbang grenade. It had an explosion, hit the ground, and exploded again. And there wasn't there was a little bit of smoke, but there wasn't enough to clear a crowd. There wasn't any gas. That was an improvised explosive device that just blew up right in front of the mayor of Portland. And not only did he not move away, not only did he not retreat, he's standing his ground because he knows what's coming next. He knows he's about to be tear gassed. And that was his goal of the evening. His goal of the evening was to get tear gassed. And it happened. He got tear gassed. Whether he got hit or whether it just like kind of wafted towards him, that's something that really pisses me off about all of this. You see people say, oh man, the majority of the people who were tear gassed were peaceful protesters. Well, the way tear gas works is once it goes off, the wind kind of moves it everywhere. So when you, even with a pepper ball, when a law enforcement shoots a pepper ball at a protester, what happens is that it's basically like it's a little, I don't know, it's like a little, I'm not putting up the white power symbol. Don't report me. I'm just showing you a circle with my hand. It's not white power. It's just a circle. So it's basically like a paintball. If anyone's ever seen a paintball gun, tiny, maybe half-inch diameter, maybe a little bit more. But instead of paint, the pepper balls are filled with some kind of pepper. It essentially is a type of very spicy pepper. But it's designed that when it hits you, it's designed to basically go everywhere. So when they shoot someone with a pepper ball, they're aiming at one person. Right? When they hit that person with the pepper ball, though, the pepper spray goes everywhere, and then other people breathe it in. Right? That's what happens when you're outside and it's windy. So when they say, "Oh man, I was just there, I was peacefully protesting, and they tear gassed me," it's not really true, right? They didn't tear gas you. You just happen to be standing next to someone who got tear gassed, which again, it makes me question your choice of evening activities. I don't want to hear that you got tear gassed when you're standing next to domestic terrorists who are trying to burn down a courthouse, who are tossing explosives towards cops. Because even if you're not being the one tossing the explosives or committing arson, the fact that you're out there standing next to them, I'm sorry, I don't have any pity for you. If you're out there knowing that it's been declared an unlawful assembly, seeing what's going on, I have no sympathy if you breathe a little tear gas in yourself. I just don't. Make better choices. Choose other evening activities. There's plenty of things you can do with your evenings that don't result in federal officers tear gassing you, right? And that's the other thing. The federal officers are like, we're here to protect this building. They could be doing this rioting anywhere else in the city, and the police, the local police, have a stand down order to not arrest them. They would have no pushback if they went a couple blocks the other direction and targeted a different building. They're doing this because they want the federal officers to be shooting them. They want to stage a Kent State. They want a Kent State. Now, anyone who doesn't know, Kent State, during the Vietnam War, there was a protest at Kent State University, and protesters got shot. The National Guard came in, and the National Guard actually started shooting protesters. It was a horrible thing, right? No one wants to see that. Whether you're for the Vietnam War or not, no one wants to see protesters being gunned down by National Guard. That's what the left wants to create with Portland. That's what they wanted to do with the Chaz/CHOP. They didn't get their way, right? Trump didn't fall for it. With Portland, that's what they're trying to do. So they could literally go a couple blocks down the road and they'd be free to burn down whatever building they want, and the local police wouldn't stop them. But the reason they keep coming back here is because they want the pushback. They want to either kill or injure federal officers, or they want to get shot back at. Right? So when you see Ted Wheeler there standing in front, everyone around him knows it's coming, right? They're there to get tear gas. That's what they want to happen, right? They want to be tear gas. They want to be shot with pepper balls. They want to be shot with rubber bullets so they can become the poster boy of how horrible Trump is. So when Ted Wheeler moves to the front of the line, he knows what's coming. The amazing thing is you just watched, I just showed you maybe a minute of actual footage from the night. And during that minute of footage, you were able to see crimes being committed. I walked through how destructive devices carry the same criminal penalty as a hand grenade, Federal Firearms Act of 1934. It's federal crime, right? It's more than 5 years in prison. I think it's around 10 if you're committing another crime doing it, right? But at the minimum 5 years just for holding it in your hand. When you throw it at someone, then it's assault. Then you start tacking on the charges. We've just watched a minute of footage, or if you're listening to the podcast, listen to me explain a minute of footage. And we've seen countless laws being broken. The mayor of Portland saw it a little differently. He, even seeing the explosives flying past his face, even seeing the incendiary devices being hurled, even seeing the arsonist trying to burn down the building, he still contends that they did nothing to deserve it. Let's play cut 11.
I'm not gonna lie, it stings, it's hard to breathe, and I can tell you with 100% honesty, I saw nothing that provoked this response. It's nasty stuff. I'm not afraid, but I am pissed off.
What are you pissed about?
This is a egregious overreaction on the part of the federal officers. There was nothing that I saw anybody do that warranted this reaction. And all it's doing, as you can see, it hasn't stopped the crowd. So they fired munitions, they fired tear gas. All it's done is piss everybody off even more. It's made people angry. They've come in and they've clicked the hornet's nest. This is not a de-escalation strategy. This is flat out urban warfare. And it's being brought on the people of this country by the President of the United States. And it's got to stop now. This is a threat to our democracy.
I'm sorry, did you see that? Did you hear that? He's saying that the President of the United States is committing urban warfare because he saw nothing to justify tear gas. Tear gas is a less than lethal option that officers have. It's on the hierarchy. It's below rubber bullets, obviously. It's below a taser because you can really die if you get tased, right? It's below rubber bullets. It's below a taser. It's below live ammunition, right? It's tear gas. It's designed to push people away. He just said that he saw nothing to justify tear gas. I'm going to play it again. This is a video of him standing against a fence watching a homemade explosive device explode feet away from him. Let's play cut 10.
You've been doing that for 50 nights, Ted. There it is. There it is, Ted.
Cut it right there. That's an improvised explosive device that literally blew up right in front of him. Right in front of him. It's a chain link fence. He can see it. He even did, if you watch it, he even did flinch a little bit. A homemade explosive blew up right in front of him. And he's still running to the camera and saying, oh, I can see nothing that would justify this. I can see nothing that would justify this. This is urban warfare. President of the United States killing people for no reason. Tear gassing people for no reason. It's incredible. I mean, am I off base? We just watched a few short clips. Listen to a few short clips of laws being broken. And he's over here saying, oh, no, this is peaceful. He's saying, oh, these are peaceful protesters. Yeah. No, it wasn't the protesters that did this. He said the federal officers were kicking a hornet's nest. Well, first of all, anyone who has ever had to clear hornets out of their backyard knows you don't want hornets, right? Forget about kicking a hornet's nest. Explain to me why the street is full of hornets. Right? Let's take this analogy to its ultimate conclusion. You are the mayor of a city, and there is an infestation of hornets, and that's not to try and dehumanize people. I'm just using his analogy. You have a street full of hornets. Every night, the hornets come back. Every night, the hornets do what hornets do. And you had 50 days to deal with the hornets. You had 50 days to deal with the problem. At no point did you even pretend to care about it. Right? It's all let off Steve. What did Nancy Pelosi say when she was asked to condemn the people who tear down the statues? So people will do what they do. That's what we're seeing in Portland. People are doing what they will do. And the reason they're able to do that is because they're not getting any pushback. So you have a street full of hornets for 50, I think we're up to 55 straight days of hornets. And this guy did nothing about it. I'm not saying you kill the protesters because that's how the analogy would go. You spray the hornets, right? I'm not saying that, but to say that you've sat back while just hornets have been running everywhere and now you're accusing the feds of kicking the hornet's nest. No, it doesn't work like that. It doesn't work like that at all. We've talked about this on the show before. The 14th Amendment. The 14th Amendment did a lot of things. So you had the 13th Amendment that freed the slaves. The 14th Amendment made it illegal, unconstitutional, for states or localities to violate people's rights. So you had the 13th Amendment that freed the slaves, and you had the 14th Amendment, which guaranteed like citizenship, right? It made sure that you couldn't have your rights violated. But it also included a provision in it that if your rights were violated, that the federal government has the ability to come in. It's either Congress's responsibility or the courts can rule. We've seen courts issue 14th Amendment decisions all the time, or the executive branch can rule. Now, one of the ways the executive branch can rule is through the Insurrection Act. We've been talking about this on the show for a while. Trump isn't doing it because he doesn't want to take the bait, because you see how bad it is when people are getting tear gas. Imagine if it was, imagine the coverage if it was uniformed military rolling down the street in tanks. It would be a horrible image. Even if it's justified, it would be a horrible political image. But the Insurrection Act, what the Insurrection Act actually says, a lot of people think that, oh, you're just going to send the troops. And no, what the Insurrection Act says is that when local or state authorities are unable or unwilling to protect their residents' rights and provide for their safety, then the federal government can come in and do the job for them. Now, that's just one of the ways that the 14th Amendment can go into effect, because while these aren't necessarily individual enumerated rights, you have the right to life, you have the right to safety, you have the right to walk down your street without having an explosive device hurled past your face. And if the local government, if the state won't do anything about it, then the Constitution and the law says that the federal government can. So when you see Ted Wheeler, Mayor Ted Wheeler, standing there as explosives are flying past, as incendiary devices, as something lit on fire, throwing fire, and trying to burn down the building, he's there and saying, "Well, I saw nothing. I saw nothing that could justify tear gas." That is the whole problem. This has been going on for almost 2 months, and he has not seen anything to justify even non-lethal force as a mechanism to stop it. That's the problem. That's why Trump is coming in, because he's such a weak and feckless leader that he's staring right at it, right? These things are blowing up feet away from him. And even then, he can't even identify that laws are being broken. So that is why Trump had to go in. He didn't use the Insurrection Act, but it's the same basic principle. If a state or locality cannot or will not enforce the law and protect the citizens' rights, then the federal government has the obligation. It's not just the right to, federal government has the obligation to do it, right? So they think that this is supporting their whole argument. I see it differently. But the reason we're going through all this and going through this in such detail and actually talking about the law, talking about the Constitution, citing the laws, right, is to kind of get rid of this narrative that these are lawless stormtrooper goons. So one thing I'm going to ask everyone watching is to please hit the share button if you haven't already. Share this, because the media, even today, they're running with the headline that the mayor of Portland was tear gassed. Oh, Trump, such a meanie, tear gassed the mayor. We've just gone through the videos of how he was asking to be tear gassed. He went to the front line, standing up against the fence as explosives were going off around him. He wanted to be tear gassed. So the media is already crafting this narrative that the feds are out of control. So please, please, please share the video. Give us a thumbs up, a like, and comment in the comment section so we can make sure more people can see what is going on. So we're going to keep talking about this, but before I do, I want to mention the sponsor of today's show. The sponsor is actually the Conservative Daily Store. We haven't done this in a while, but I'll mention it. We can throw up the picture. This is our I Back Blue t-shirt, and we have one that is a full design. We have another one that is a little bit cheaper, but I Back Blue, we're putting these out so people can show their support for law enforcement. So check it out in our description on Facebook and on YouTube. We have the link to our store. If you want to buy your I Back Blue t-shirt and support the show, support the channel, we'd really appreciate it. Okay, so that little plug aside, I want to play another clip of the mayor, because people are making fun of him all over social media, because he's there. Not only did he get chased out by the protesters because they want nothing to do with him, but he also got tear gas. So it's like the ultimate fail. But this video of him saying, like, I saw nothing, people are really, really, they're really doing a number on it. So there's another clip, and we'll play it. It's a side-by-side of him talking and showing the violence, the lawlessness going on. I won't describe anymore. Let's play. Let's go to cut 12.
I can tell you with 100% honesty, I saw nothing that provoked this response. It's nasty stuff. I'm not afraid, but I am pissed off.
What are you pissed about?
This is a egregious overreaction on the part of the federal officers. There was nothing that I saw anybody do that
as they're tearing down the fence.
And all it's doing, as you can see, it hasn't stopped the fence. They fired munitions, they fired tear gas.
As they're trying to burn down the building.
It's made people angry. They've come in and they've kicked a hornet's nest. Sure. This is not a de-escalation strategy. This is flat out urban warfare. And it's being brought on the people of this country by the President of the United States. And it's got to stop now. This is
So we already listened to him give that speech. I wanted to play it again because that was a Twitter video. There are a couple different Twitter videos, one from Mr. Olmos, one from by Mike Baker. They were involved in that little montage. I wanted to show that because it's just so funny. Like the first clip of that side-by-side actually turns to him as he's giving this interview, right? And you can see that there are just fires around him. People are trying to tear down the fence, throwing explosives at agents, at federal officers. And he's sitting here like, oh, I don't know. I didn't see anything lawless. Only lawless thing I see is President Trump bringing violence to our city. I laugh because it's so obviously false. But this really isn't funny. It is funny because it's kind of like that clip we played a couple weeks ago. What was it? The CNN or MSNBC reporter standing in front of a building being burned to the ground. And he's saying, well, we're here in Minneapolis at a peaceful protest. And the building behind him is just up in flames. It's like one of those moments where you're not chuckling at the violence. You're chuckling at how they're doing everything they can to pretend it's not happening, even when it's in frame. Right? It's one thing if they're in a studio refusing to show the footage, which they're doing. Right, you don't see this footage on the news. It's not a complete blackout. You see some of it on Fox. It took them a while, right? But you don't see the details. All you see is, Portland mayor tear gas. You don't see that he's basically hugging the fence, hoping to get tear gassed, right? Even as explosions are going on around him, you don't see that, right? They're constructing the narrative this way for a reason, because the media wants the narrative to be that Trump overreacted, that Trump is sending stormtroopers. I love the notion that these people are unmarked police, right? They're saying like, oh, they're unnamed. You look at any of these videos, any of these pictures, police right around their chest. They're wearing a Velcro badge, right? Police, and usually they also have what department they're with, whether it's U.S. Marshals, Secret Service, DHS, or Homeland Security. Right? Some of them say Border Patrol, Immigration and Customs Enforcement. They're all marked. They're all uniformed. You just haven't seen them in this uniform because we've never gotten to the point where for 50 straight days they're trying to burn down a federal courthouse. You haven't seen the riot gear come out for the U.S. Marshal Service in a while, right? But it's all hands on deck. I don't know. If anyone thinks I'm off base here, feel free to comment in the comment section on Sharon Atkins says, I love stormtroopers. Yeah, I hope, I guess that's talking about Trump's stormtroopers. Maybe she's talking about Star Wars. The interesting thing is you go back to Dwight Eisenhower, right? When Dwight Eisenhower sent the National Guard into Little Rock, Arkansas to make sure that the African-American kids who wanted to go to the white school, that they were allowed to integrate into the schools. At the time, those guardsmen were called stormtroopers. I mean, you just go through history, and there's so many instances of Republican presidents having to use either the National Guard, the military, law enforcement, to ensure that people's rights are protected because Democrats won't do it. Right? That's what we're talking about. When George H.W. Bush used the Insurrection Act to send American forces into Los Angeles to quell the L.A. riots, that wasn't because he wanted to kill everyone in L.A. It was because the L.A. riots were bad. and the Democrat governor, Democrat mayors and council wouldn't do anything about it, right? They were feckless. They were letting their city burn down around them. So you look at all the instances. I mean, you go all the way back to the Civil War, Republican president, right? Our history is full of instances where Republicans are left with no choice but to use force to make sure that Democrats aren't able to ignore the situation and that innocent people aren't forced to suffer as a result. And whenever it happens, they're called stormtroopers. They're called domestic. Well, what are they calling Trump? Not a domestic, a despot, dictator. They said this is a banana republic, not the store in the mall, a banana republic. Most people will know that I wasn't talking about the clothing boutique. I just wanted to make sure I clarified that. That's what they're calling Trump, right? They have no problem with the lawlessness. Normally, like they went 50 days before they actually put up a fit about them trying to burn down the courthouse in Portland every single night, right? Even in the Chaz/CHOP, people were being gunned down in the streets, and you still had Democrat members of Congress testifying in subcommittees and in committees that, oh no, it's being overblown. It's a summer of love. It's all peaceful. Nothing's happening, while people are being gunned down in the streets of Seattle. And you had the elected representatives portraying it as, oh no, that's not happening. But we have footage. No, it's not happening. That's what they were saying. No, that's fake news. It's incredible that we have this footage. And thank goodness for people like Andy No and other conservative reporters who were able to get this footage, unaltered, unadulterated footage. Because like when you look at Project Veritas, the thing they always say about Project Veritas is like, oh, they edited their footage. It was selectively edited. When you have like 2 minutes of people just tearing down a gate, when you have like footage of just explosives being tossed at police officers, you can't claim it's edited, right? They're putting it out on Periscope. They're putting it out on Twitter, on Facebook, right? On YouTube live streams. You can't say it's edited. So thank goodness for people like them, conservative reporters like them. But it just, I go back to it. It's, we have to take action here, right? We talked on the podcast yesterday with John Teagan, one of the Benghazi contractors who was at the consulate in 2012 when it was overrun because he got a stand down order. And we were talking to him about what it feels like to get a stand down order like that. And he said, yeah, obviously his experience was different, but because he was in the military, or he was a contractor at that point. And what he says, it feels incredibly demoralizing when you know you can do something, when you know you can save someone's life, but someone above you, for political reasons, has decided not to let you do it. He said it's one of the most demoralizing feelings you can have as a soldier, as a police officer. Seeing, because listen, there are bad apples in every profession. There are going to be bad police officers, but you don't become a police officer for the money. You become a police officer because you care about your community, right? You want to do good. You want to help your neighborhood. You want to help people. Police officers, by and large, they're good people. Like, yeah, sure, they pull you over and you get pissed, but most times, like I can probably count maybe one or two instances where I ever had a bad experience with a police officer. Everything else has been great. Now, again, I'm not breaking the law on a daily basis. That might be part of it, right? Surprise! If you don't want bad experiences with law enforcement, don't break the law. Shouldn't come as that big of a surprise. But when you look at this, they're good people by and large. They just want to help their communities. So how do you think the officer feels? Like we were talking about in Denver, where a pro-police rally that's been held every year for 6 years, they're overrun with Antifa, Marxist, communist agitators carrying clubs and retractable batons, right? How do you think the officers feel when they know in a second they could put this down, right? In a second they could stop this. But because they got their stand down orders from either the mayor or the governor, they're just supposed to sit there and let it happen. Think about that. Think about how these people probably feel. It's incredibly demoralizing. I mean, Take was right yesterday. It's the most helpless you can feel when you have the ability to stop it and you're not allowed to. I bring that up because today, Let me see if I can get to it. It might not be today. In the next couple of days, Congress has to vote on 12 appropriations bills. So I don't want to get too far in the weeds because I'll see people start to drop off the live stream because anytime you talk about appropriations, people's eyes glaze over. So, but just to put it in a nutshell, every year the Congress has to pass 12 spending bills to keep the government funded. And those 12 spending bills deal with all different parts of the government. Every year there are two. There's one for Department of Homeland Security, which always becomes politicized as they try to remove funding for Border Patrol and wall construction and ICE detention beds, right? We hear that every year. They're trying to remove funding from it. There's also one for the Justice Department. So Democrats right now are trying to sneak in. Well, not really sneaking in. They're admitting it. They're openly and unapologetically doing it. They're adding amendments to this designed to stop and reverse Operation Legend. And I didn't really mention what Operation Legend, what this whole federal response to violence is about. Let's throw up image number 2. This is a 4-year-old boy. His name is Legend Taliaferro. I think I pronounced that right. 4-year-old boy. Lives in Kansas City. He was killed at the end of June, I believe. One of the last days of June. He was killed. He was asleep in his bed. 4-year-old boy. A stray bullet comes through the wall or the window, hits him, kills him while he's sleeping. Look at that boy. He's 4 years old. My son's 2.5. I can't look at that boy without feeling like that could be my son. Trump got wind of that, heard about it. Bill Barr heard about it. They came together and they created Operation Legend, named after that boy. And what they said was, we promise that if local and state police and politicians refuse to protect you from the lawlessness that is spreading, the federal government will come in. And what did Trump and Barr do? They sent officers into Kansas City, and they arrested 200 people in less than 3 weeks. 200 violent criminals. I don't know if they've gotten the person responsible for Legend's death, but they were able to get 200 criminals off the streets. That's just with federal officers being there for 3 weeks. You know that the police, the local police, know these people are there, right? They know these people exist. They have the evidence, right? It makes you wonder why those arrests, why it took federal intervention for those arrests to happen. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? So that's Operation Legend. It is a partnership between DOJ and DHS to put federal officers, not military, because that would require the Insurrection Act. These are federal officers from agencies like FBI, ATF, U.S. Marshals, Secret Service, Border Patrol, Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Those kinds of officers who can be deputized during a time of distress. They can be deputized and allowed to enforce federal law. So that's what's happening. It's a partnership between those two departments to send them into cities that desperately need help, even if the city government doesn't ask for it because they're too proud or they're too political. Democrats want to shut it down. Operation named after a 4-year-old boy who was shot and killed while he was sleeping in his bedroom by a stray bullet. They want to shut it down. They want to protect the status quo. Trump yesterday, we live streamed a big event. Trump made history, sending the feds into Chicago. Send them into Chicago. Why? Because a day prior, 14 people were gunned down in the streets of Chicago. Not the streets, just one street. One street, broad daylight, standing in front of a funeral home, gunned down. 14 people shot. That's what, country's third biggest city? Tucker Carlson was talking about it last night. Over 1,900 people have been shot this year so far in the city of Chicago. 1,900. And that's over 500 more than it was this point of last year. And we still have 5 months left to go in the year. 1,900 people. Think about how many people that is. They're shot. And local government not once has asked for Trump's help because they want the status quo, right? They want the status quo. And whether I don't think they actually physically want people to be shot and killed, but they prefer the status quo over Donald Trump being able to claim victory. Think about that. 1,900 people have been shot this year in Chicago. And you have a mayor, Lori Lightfoot. I will not say that she looks like Beetlejuice. That would be mean. But people have said it, that she looks like Beetlejuice. I think if you go out, I have heard that if you go into the streets of Chicago and fire your gun in the air 3 times, Mayor Lightfoot magically appears. I would never ask you to test that out. That would be bad. But I've heard that happens. I've heard from sources that happens. You shoot a gun 3 times in the air in Chicago and Mayor Beetlejuice Lightfoot appears. She's refusing to ask the feds for help. 1,900 people shot. She's okay with that. How can you argue that she isn't okay with that? If you have federal partners who we've already seen in Kansas City can get the job done and take 200 hardened criminals off the streets in just 3 weeks, when you have people being shot faster than you can order the body bags, when people are getting shot faster than they can replenish their body bags, to not call the feds for help, because she called the feds when Obama was president, not she, but the previous mayor of Chicago called the feds when Obama was president. As for his help, he didn't really do anything because he didn't actually want to fix the problem. Democrats don't really want to fix the problem. They're happy with the status quo. They're happy with people being gunned in the streets, and they're happy to keep it that way if it means Donald Trump doesn't get to claim victory, because that is far worse than 4-year-old Legend being shot and killed. Tell me I'm wrong. Tell me I'm wrong, because anyone who wants to shut down Operation Legend wants this violence to continue. They're not making a constitutional argument. I don't believe Rand Paul when he says, oh, the federal government has no right. They have the constitutional right. We just talked about it in the 14th Amendment, and they have the legal right in multiple statutes, including the Insurrection Act and others that are formulated in the same way. They have the right to go in. When cities and states refuse to protect the rights of their citizens, the federal government has an obligation to do so. So how else do you interpret it? Because right now they are trying to defund it. And I'm going to add a link in our description today on Facebook and on YouTube. We're running a campaign today because they are trying to slip through these spending bills for DHS and DOJ, and they want to stop Operation Legend. They have poison pill amendments. They have amendments designed to claw back funding. It's the power of the purse. We always hear that. It's power of the purse, power of the purse. Congress has the right to decide how federal dollars are spent. What these amendments do is say you're not allowed to spend federal dollars on Operation Legend. That's what they say. So you can't spend federal dollars on Operation Legend. If these amendments were to pass, not only would they not be able to go into other cities, but these officers enforcing the law in cities like Albuquerque now, Chicago, Portland, Kansas City, and more on the list. They're going to go into New York. Mark my words. They'd be forced to withdraw. Who wins in that scenario? It certainly isn't people like Legend, kids like Legend. It certainly aren't the family members of the people who were gunned down in the streets of Chicago for trying to attend a funeral. Who wins in that scenario? It's not the people. It isn't Trump, but that's the way the Democrats want it. They don't want Trump to be able to claim victory. They are so anti-Trump that they are okay with the status quo of people just being indiscriminately gunned down the street. It's disgusting. And honestly, Trump should have done this a long time ago. And I understand the arguments like, oh, well, Constitution, separation of powers, states' rights. No, this is Chicago. 1,900 people have been killed so far this year in Chicago. Not killed, shot. 1,900 people have been shot in Chicago so far this year alone. Right? This is a war zone. I know that they say that it's false news, but it is a fact. You are more likely to be shot in Chicago than you are to be shot in any city in Afghanistan. Now, the caveat is that they have another kind of violence there. They don't have necessarily shootings. They use car bombs and things like that. So there's other types of violence. But you look at dangerous cities around the world, and Chicago is up there. And it's not because of gun rights. It's not because of the Second Amendment. Because we hear that this week too, like, oh, if only those conservatives would lay off the Second Amendment, then people wouldn't be shot in Chicago. No, if only you didn't give stand-down orders to police. I mean, look at Baltimore. Baltimore defunded the police this month, right? They defunded parts of the police. And what was the first thing to go? The fast reactionary forces that they had in the most violent neighborhoods there to respond in real time when there was a shooting. It was a program that actually showed promise. It was actually working. When there was a shooting, they were on the scene in seconds sometimes, but almost always in a couple of minutes because they were there in the neighborhood already. They defunded the police, and one of the first programs to go was that fast reactionary force for gun violence. And then when gun violence skyrockets, instead of blaming their own stupidity, they blame gun owners. Like, oh, if it wasn't for you damn gun owners, inner city wouldn't be killing itself. Right? It's nonsense. But that's the argument, right? There's no way the Democrats have crafted this whole thing so that they can't lose the argument. The only way they lose the argument is if you have a president like Donald Trump willing to go in. Right? The Democrats have never had to deal with something like this before. For the longest time, they've been able to sit back, allow their residents to be shot and killed, and they have everything that they can blame, right? They can blame everything under the sun except themselves, because they're good, honest Democrats, and they tried their best, but they failed. When Donald Trump sends the feds in, it makes it a national story. If people start saying, wait a minute, rioters have been trying to burn down a federal courthouse for weeks straight, every night, showing up trying to do it, and Trump's the bad guy, right? He goes into Chicago saying F you, mayor saying F you, Trump, stay out of Chicago. And people are saying, wait a minute, 1,900 people have been shot in Chicago this year alone, and Trump's the bad guy? It makes you think. That's why they're mad about it, because they know that Trump is in the right here. They know that he's doing good, he's doing right for the people, which for all of Trump's faults, for all of his flaws, he has consistently done what he feels is right for the people. You can disagree with policy here, policy there. You say like, oh yeah, no, he only interested in himself. He's the first person to lose money by becoming president. Think about that. He's the first person to become president, and whether he ends it this year or hopefully in 4 more years, he'll be poor as a result. Can you think of any other president that can claim that? Clintons are millionaires. Obama's a millionaire. Bush is richer than he was going in, right? Reagan didn't become poor. He wasn't in the poorhouse. Donald Trump is the only one who's actually lost wealth by becoming president. And they claim that he is doing this for his own personal gain. They claim that he was pitching hydroxychloroquine because he had a financial stake in it. He owned a couple shares of a mutual fund that itself owned a couple shares of a company that made the generic version of hydroxychloroquine. Even if he pumped it, Trump stood to gain dozens of dollars. But the media said he had a financial stake in it, right? No matter all of his faults and flaws, no matter what you think about the tweeting, the brashness, Donald Trump has always done what he felt was best for the country. Fact. He believes that cutting back on illegal immigration will help American workers. He's right. The trade war wasn't because he wanted to just flex his muscles. It's because he knew that China was ripping off American industry. You go down the list. He is trying to do what is best for the country, and he's vilified for it. Like he's not sending stormtroopers into Portland. And I'm banning Terrence. It's Terrence Coleman on the Facebook stream. Getting to be too much. Sorry, Terrence. Bye bye. He's not doing this for himself, right? He's doing this for the people. And one of the last thoughts I'll leave you with as we wrap up this podcast. If you haven't watched the whole thing, if you're just joining now, make sure you go back to the beginning. Make sure you like and share the video too, because this was a good episode. I'm not just saying that because Joe is absent. No, we like Joe. We want him to get back in the chair as soon as he can. He's actually on a business trip. Make sure you rewind, like the video, give it a thumbs up. I'll leave you with this. Every day for the last couple of weeks, we've been trying to highlight things that the mainstream media doesn't want to cover. And we've been trying to explain why the mainstream media doesn't want to cover it, whether it's talking about masks, whether it's talking about the riots, talking about Trump's response, right? Coronavirus lockdowns, shutting down the schools. We've tried to present the point of view that the mainstream media is making it out to be like it doesn't exist, right? When the mainstream media says that there is consensus behind the idea that masks will keep everyone safe, well, no, not really. If masks kept everyone safe, then there would be no need to release the prisoners from the prisons, right? We're seeing all around this country they're releasing prisoners from prisons. Why not just give them masks, right? What am I missing here? If the mask will keep you safe, then we don't need to release prisoners into our streets. Just give them masks, right? So we've been going through all of these different issues, trying to pinpoint how the media is lying to you, how the media is deliberately twisting things to create a different narrative that they want you to believe. And we've been trying to do this to teach everyone to think critically about things. Go into things with an open mind, but also understand that if it feels too good to be true or too bad to be true, it probably is. If you read a headline that says Donald Trump sent stormtroopers in to abduct and kidnap teenagers, that's a lie, right? We've gone through this. That's a lie. That is taking the worst possible way to describe every single bit of what we've been talking about and using that word in the thesaurus, right? Stormtroopers, no, he's sending federal officers. Abduct, no, they're arresting. Teenagers, no, they're rioters. Think critically about things. And when you find that the media is lying to you, when you find that the left is pushing this false narrative, don't let them get away with it. Now, what do I mean by that? Obviously, continue watching the podcast, share it, click the like, comment. We really appreciate it. But also make sure that you have that discussion with other people. It's harder when you're in the lockdowns and the quarantines. I get it. But there are people out there who are not as smart as you, who do not think as critically as you, and they are falling for the propaganda hook, line, and sinker. So part of the way that we win this is not to go out and start clubbing people. No, don't do that. Leave that to the Antifa types. Win it in the debate of words. Explain to people when the mainstream media and the left are lying to them. Explain how they are lying to them, and pick it apart. Because as we've talked about this, it is very easy to pick apart these narratives. It is very easy to pick apart the narrative that teenagers are being abducted for no reason, when we can literally pull the actual indictment, the charging documents, the evidence pictures of, oh, no, he wasn't abducted. He was arrested for trying to hit a police officer in the head with a hammer. And here's the photo of the hammer from evidence, right? It's very easy to do it. So do it. Do you know who among your family or friends buy into this? We all have a couple. It's not our fault. We all have a couple of idiots. No, not idiots. They're ignorant. And that's not a pejorative. That just means they don't know the truth yet. You know who they are. You know the lies that they're buying. Teach them otherwise. It won't happen overnight. You won't fix it overnight. But you got to have that conversation, because you can't have this narrative spreading that Donald Trump is abducting teenagers off the street of Portland for no reason. You can't allow it to spread. So that'll be my final word for the podcast. Again, like, share, comment on this episode. Really do appreciate it. And if you haven't watched it from the beginning, definitely rewind it after we post it. A lot of good stuff showing how Portland Mayor Ted Wheeler got tear gassed and was asking for it, and then cried that it shouldn't happen. So definitely check that out. Well, that's going to be it for this edition of the Conservative Daily Podcast. If you want to find the podcast, you can find us on Apple Podcasts. If you have an iPhone, we're on Google Play Store. If you have an Android, we're now also on Spotify, so you can check us out there. You also find us on the Podbean app, as well as conservative-daily.com. We're live streaming every day, Monday through Friday when we do this, on Facebook and on YouTube. So check us out there. If you want to watch, if you're just listening, you can watch our live stream where we play the videos. Check us out there and leave a comment. Let us know what you think. We really do appreciate the feedback. I know I didn't get to a lot of things today because I'm just trying to do this on my own, but a lot of funny things people were typing. And we really do appreciate the comments in. So again, my name is Max McGuire. Joe Otto is out today. Remember that the fight to take back our country clearly isn't over, but the only way we win is if we all stand and fight together.